With flashlights cutting through the dark and terrain rough beneath their feet, officers made their way across uneven ground. They stepped over fallen limbs and pushed through tall grass that brushed against their waists. The search had brought them deep into the field, every movement careful, every shadow examined. And then they stopped. Concealed among dense brush and towering stalks of wheat lay the discovery no one wanted to make. The search had come to an end. Ellen was found, but not alive. The atmosphere shifted. Even seasoned officers showed signs of quiet sorrow. The area was immediately secured, every inch recorded with deliberate precision. Nothing could be overlooked. No action could be rushed. The gravity of the moment was undeniable. Dear viewers, thank you for choosing our video and our channel. We put a lot of effort into making sure you enjoy being with us. Ellen Higginbottom was born in the summer of 1998 in Boothtown, a peaceful and close-knit neighborhood tucked just outside the vibrant town of Salford, a short journey from Wigan. Her upbringing was the kind that left an impression, marked by warmth, optimism, and the steady support of two loving parents, Mike and Kay Higginbottom. From her earliest days, Ellen was a beacon of light in the lives of everyone who knew her. Her kindness wasn't performative, it was innate. Whether she was helping a classmate or rescuing an injured animal, Ellen's heart was always in the right place. Ellen wasn't just kind, she was incredibly gifted. From a young age, she showed a deep affinity for music. She spent hours with her headphones on, humming along to her favorite songs, or strumming softly on her guitar in the cozy corner of her bedroom. She didn't chase fame or accolades, she played because it brought her joy. Alongside music, she nurtured a profound love for horses and animals of all kinds. Her bedroom walls were lined with equestrian posters, veterinary textbooks, and photos of her with ponies from local stables. She was one of those rare souls who found peace in the presence of animals, and they, in turn, seemed to gravitate toward her. Driven by this lifelong passion, Ellen set her sights on a future as a veterinarian. Her love of creatures, great and small, wasn't just a passing interest. It was a calling that shaped her academic journey. By the time she enrolled at Winstanley College to study psychology, her goal was clear. She wanted to merge her academic pursuits with her compassion for animals. She envisioned a future where she could specialize in animal behavior and make a difference in the lives of both pets and people. Those around her believed she could do anything she set her mind to. In her personal life, Ellen had found love and companionship in Ryan Warren, her boyfriend of 2 years. Their relationship was the kind that made people smile, a true teenage romance filled with laughter, late-night chats, and shared dreams. Ryan affectionately called her Nugget, a nickname that captured Ellen's fun-loving, occasionally scatterbrained, but always lovable personality. They often talked about traveling the world together, finding a small house with a big garden for rescue animals, and maybe, someday, starting a family. They were young, but their love was sincere. Like anyone, Ellen had her quirks. She would frequently get lost during nature walks, sometimes more focused on photographing wildflowers than paying attention to the trail. She'd often forget her lines during school performances or misplace her keys right before rushing out the door. But those moments, far from flaws, were what made her Ellen. She was beautifully human, flawed in the most charming ways. Friday, June 16, 2017, began as a typical summer day in Greater Manchester. The sun was out, casting a golden hue over the tree-lined paths of Orrell Water Park, a 70-acre nature reserve beloved by locals. Families picnicked by the lake, joggers moved along the winding paths, and dogs chased sticks into the calm water. It was the kind of day that invited relaxation and felt almost suspended in time. That afternoon, Ellen, preparing for her A-levels, took a break from studying and decided to walk through Orrell Water Park. It was supposed to be a short, refreshing stroll, a reward after a morning of hitting the books. At 1:43 p.m., she sent a Snapchat to her friends that read, "Been in the park for 20 minutes and I'm already lost," followed by a laughing emoji. Her friends chuckled at the message. This was classic Ellen, playful, light-hearted, and ever the wanderer. But as the hours passed and there were no updates, the light-heartedness turned into concern. Ellen, who was always quick to respond, suddenly went silent. By early evening, her parents began to worry. It wasn't like her to go off the radar. When the clock struck 7:20 p.m., Mike Higginbottom made a call that would set everything in motion. He reported his daughter missing to Greater Manchester Police. Ellen's disappearance was taken seriously from the outset. The circumstances were unsettling. A bright, responsible student suddenly vanishing without a trace. Her last known location, the Snapchat from the park, became the immediate focus of the investigation. Ellen's friends flooded social media with messages, photos, and pleas for anyone who had seen her to come forward. A wave of digital concern swept across the region. Oral Water Park transformed that evening. What had been a serene setting just hours earlier was now the center of an urgent search. As the sky darkened, search teams fanned out across the wooded trails, lake edges, and nearby marshes. Flashlights danced across the ground. Volunteers combed the grass and underbrush. Police, guided by Ellen's phone data and friend reports, narrowed their efforts to a specific area near the western edge of the park. Just before the clock struck midnight, a second phone call came in from Mike to local law enforcement. His voice, now strained and heavier with anxiety, was unmistakably urgent. This wasn't mere impatience. It was instinct. Something felt terribly, irreversibly wrong. Ellen, his younger cousin and someone he had always admired for her punctuality and sense of responsibility, had now been out of contact for hours. This was not like her. She wasn't someone who would vanish without a word. If she were late or delayed, she would call or send a message. Her silence was unnatural, alarming. Mike didn't mince words during the call. He pleaded for authorities to increase the urgency of the case. He emphasized how unlike Ellen this was. She had always kept close contact with family, whether heading out for an afternoon walk or planning a weekend away. His concern, as it turned out, was not misplaced. In response, law enforcement escalated the case status to a high-priority missing person situation. A full-scale coordinated search was quickly initiated. Multiple search units were dispatched, including canine teams, ground patrol officers, and a police helicopter outfitted with thermal imaging systems, tools typically reserved for the most serious emergencies. From their aerial vantage point, the helicopter crew scanned every inch of the region below. Open plains, thick clusters of trees, narrow winding trails, and the surrounding farmlands that bordered the edges of Oral Water Park. For a while, nothing stood out. The fields appeared serene, the night sky undisturbed except for the rhythmic sweep of the helicopter's searchlight. But then, something shifted. The thermal camera detected an unexpected source of heat, an anomaly, positioned in an open field near the park's southern edge. The figure appeared motionless, partially obscured by vegetation, situated just beyond a marshy section of land that was rarely visited and almost never by accident. This moment changed everything. That small, bright signal on the thermal screen, just a flicker at first, became the focus of the entire operation. Back in the control room, an eerie silence fell as officers huddled around the monitor, the screen showing only abstract shapes and contrasting colors. The key question, unspoken but collectively understood, was chilling in its simplicity. Could that be Ellen? Was she hurt? Disoriented? Trying to signal for help in the only way she could? Or was this someone else entirely? Perhaps someone responsible for her disappearance? These thoughts raced through every mind in the room. The helicopter team radioed the exact GPS coordinates to officers on the ground. Within minutes, units redirected their search path, moving with precision and caution toward the location. Flashlights in hand, and with guidance from above, officers crossed uneven terrain, dodging fallen branches and navigating through overgrown grass that reached waist height. The moon cast a faint silver glow, and the air was heavy with anticipation. What they discovered, however, was a sight that brought the search to a devastating pause. Hidden deep within the tall grain of a wheat field, tucked behind a natural screen of brush and thick stalks, was the answer they'd been hoping not to find. Ellen had been located, but not under the circumstances anyone had prayed for. The scene, while handled with the utmost professionalism and respect, was undeniably distressing. Officers quickly secured the perimeter, ensuring no details were overlooked. Law enforcement refrained from releasing graphic details, maintaining dignity for Ellen and her loved ones. 2 items stood out immediately to the investigating team: a worn leather belt and a small metal spade. Both were clearly out of place and were carefully documented and removed for forensic testing. These objects, though seemingly mundane, introduced a darker layer of intent to the unfolding investigation. Even more concerning was what wasn't found at the scene. Ellen's belongings, her backpack, her mobile phone, and her laptop were all missing. Those close to her knew how vital those items were to her daily life. She was a dedicated student, always working on assignments, and she rarely went anywhere without staying digitally connected. The absence of these possessions was troubling and suggested either deliberate removal or an attempt to obscure evidence. The case was now officially under the direction of Detective Superintendent Howard Millington, a senior investigator with over 2 decades of experience handling high-profile and emotionally charged cases. Known for his careful, methodical approach, Millington wasted no time assembling a task force. He understood instantly that this was not a typical disappearance. The precision of what had occurred, the narrow window of time, the remote location, each detail painted a portrait of premeditation. Investigators quickly began piecing together Ellen's final known movements. She had been last seen at Winstanley College around 1 p.m. Friends confirmed she had left campus intending to clear her mind with a walk through Oral Water Park, a spot she often visited to relax. Her final known communication came via Snapchat at 1:43 p.m. A light-hearted message. "Been in the park for 20 minutes and I'm already lost." It was a line that now carried a haunting resonance. From that point, nothing. Authorities believe the critical moment occurred sometime between 1:45 and 2:15 p.m. This 30-minute window became the center of all investigative focus. The wheat field where she was discovered wasn't a place one would simply stumble into. It sat just beyond the park's official boundaries, its entrance concealed by thick vegetation. This raised a deeply unsettling possibility. Ellen was being followed, or lured to that location. Officers immediately cordoned off a wide perimeter around the field. A forensic tent was erected, and investigators worked through the night to preserve every detail of the scene. The next morning, as word quietly spread through the community, locals began leaving flowers at the park's entrance, some in silence, others offering gentle prayers for Ellen's family. Detectives then turned their focus to those who had visited the park that day. A public appeal was issued, urging anyone who had been in or around Oral Water Park between noon and 3 p.m. to come forward. The smallest observation could be vital. Around the same time, an earlier report resurfaced, one that hadn't drawn much attention until now. On the previous day, Thursday, June 15th, 2 women had reported being followed through the park by a man behaving suspiciously. They had left unharmed, but uneasy. Detective Millington now believed this could be more than a coincidence. As the investigation expanded, officers began canvassing nearby neighborhoods, speaking with dozens of local residents. Doors were knocked on, CCTV footage was requested, and digital trails were combed through. They began with Ellen's inner circle, not to cast suspicion, but to build a picture of who she was and what her life looked like in those final days. Her boyfriend, Ryan Warren, was among the first to be questioned. He spoke openly about their relationship, how they had talked about getting engaged, building a future together. Ellen was his nugget, he told them, a nickname that brought tears to his eyes. He offered up their text exchanges, voice messages, and recent photos, anything that might help. Ellen's best friend, Chloe Williams, described her as careful, cautious, and always aware of her surroundings. She wasn't the type to take risks with strangers, especially not in isolated areas. Her parents, Mike and Kay Higginbottom, painted a picture of a kind and thoughtful daughter, someone who avoided conflict and genuinely believed. These interviews began to rule out any theory involving personal conflict. Police leaned heavily toward the disturbing but increasingly likely theory that Ellen had been the victim of a stranger attack, a statistically rare but deeply unsettling possibility. As they followed this theory, another significant lead emerged. The police helicopter's heat detection footage revealed that the person running through the field had appeared shortly after 2 a.m., hours after the initial search began, and not long before Ellen was found. Investigators theorized that this individual may have returned to the scene, perhaps to move or hide evidence, only to be scared away by the helicopter's presence. The area was quickly reswept, And this time, forensic teams made key discoveries. The belt and the spade, left near Ellen's location, held DNA. Not Ellen's, and not anyone from her circle of friends or family. It was a new profile, previously unlinked to the case, but fresh and clear. With this breakthrough, investigators issued another urgent appeal to the public. They released general descriptions of Ellen's missing belongings and asked for help locating anything suspicious. The plea worked. A local resident contacted police to report a small fire in a nearby woodland area that had caught their attention days earlier. It had seemed out of place, quiet, isolated, and poorly timed, happening late at night with no visible campers or walkers nearby. Police rushed to the area. What they found there would take the investigation even deeper and closer to uncovering the truth behind what happened to Ellen Higginbottom on that tragic summer afternoon. Among the still smoldering remains of a campfire, investigators uncovered something crucial: partially burnt personal belongings that were quickly identified as Ellen's. Her laptop, keys, and a few other scorched items had been tossed into the flames in what was clearly a rushed and poorly thought-out attempt to destroy evidence. The condition of the objects suggested the fire had only recently been extinguished, meaning someone had been there within hours, maybe even minutes, of law enforcement's arrival. The burn site was immediately sealed off. Officers began analyzing not just the items, but the context of the fire itself. The location was remote enough that someone would have needed to know the area to reach it easily. This wasn't a random act. The intention behind the fire was unmistakable: to erase any trace of a connection between these items and Ellen's final hours. But the execution was sloppy, and it backfired. That same weekend, on Sunday, June 18th, the case reached its first major turning point. Based on witness accounts, including sightings of someone attempting to light a fire in the Billing Woods earlier that day, police arrested a man from the neighborhood, 47-year-old David Steele. He lived on Oakley Avenue, just a short walk from the park and within close proximity to the burn site. Locals knew David Steele. His face was familiar around town, though most described him as eccentric and reclusive. He had a history of minor offenses, mostly petty theft and trespassing, but nothing that suggested a background. Neighbors often saw him wandering the streets late at night, sometimes mumbling to himself or carrying plastic bags. To most, he seemed harmless. Odd, maybe, but not dangerous. Following his arrest, police executed a search warrant on his home. Inside, they recovered clothing, electronics, and other materials potentially linked to the case. Steele, however, denied any wrongdoing, telling detectives he'd been at home all day on June 16th and had no idea who Ellen was. His alibi lacked confirmation, and inconsistencies in his statements only deepened police suspicion. But David Steele wasn't the only one on their radar. In the following days, investigators made 2 more arrests: Dean Speakman and Vicky Kayland, both 30, residents of Cabor Avenue, also in Billing. Like Steele, they were found in possession of stolen items later confirmed to have belonged to Ellen. Speakman and Kayland didn't try to burn the evidence but were linked to its movement and concealment. The 3 suspects, Steele, Speakman, and Kayland, were charged with a variety of offenses, including handling stolen goods, obstruction of justice, and interfering with a police investigation. But despite their suspicious behavior, no direct forensic evidence tied any of them to the wheat field where Ellen had been found. The focus now turned to a pressing question. If these individuals hadn't committed the attack themselves, how did they come to possess Ellen's belongings? The answer came shortly afterward, and it changed the course of the investigation entirely. DNA analysis of the leather belt and spade recovered near Ellen's location revealed 2 critical pieces of information. One DNA profile belonged to Ellen, but the second, an unknown male, matched a man already in the national database, Mark Stephen Buckley, age 51. Police acted quickly. Buckley was arrested at his flat on Newhall Lane in Preston, approximately 20 miles from Wigan. The arrest was swift and quiet, as officers wanted to prevent any potential destruction of evidence. Though Buckley now lived in Preston, he had long-standing ties to the Billing area, where his mother still resided, in a housing estate adjacent to Orrell Water Park. That proximity, combined with his sudden relocation to Preston following a 2016 arson conviction, for setting a neighbor's car on fire, raised immediate red flags. A search of Buckley's residence yielded concerning results. Tucked in a corner of his wardrobe was a green duffel bag containing rope, gloves, and outdoor gear, items that, while not illegal, took on a different weight in the context of this case. The DNA from the belt and spade was a conclusive match for Buckley, tying him directly to the location where Ellen had been found. Despite the growing mountain of evidence, Buckley denied any involvement. During initial interviews, he admitted to being in the park that day, but claimed he had simply found the items lying around and took them. His story was vague, his demeanor evasive. Investigators were unconvinced. Detective Bob Tong, the senior investigating officer, later commented in a press briefing, "Mark Buckley's criminal record didn't scream violent offender. But the evidence we uncovered, from the items in his flat to the timeline of events, painted a very different picture. It suggested planning, preparation, and a clear attempt to distance himself from the crime." Investigators doubled down, returning to witness statements and public leads from the week leading up to Ellen's disappearance. A dog walker recalled seeing a man, stocky build, shaved head, wearing a long coat despite the heat, near the park entrance on the afternoon of June 16th. He had been carrying a green bag, matching the one later found in Buckley's home. Another woman reported a disturbing encounter on Thursday, June 15th, the day before the crime. A man had approached her in the park and asked if she often walked alone. She dismissed it at the time, but her detailed description matched Buckley. These accounts suggested he had been scouting the area, potentially looking for a victim. Further evidence came in the form of CCTV footage collected from nearby roads and shops. Buckley was seen leaving his residence early on the morning of the 16th, wearing layered clothing, despite the warm weather. In one clip, he appeared to be walking briskly toward the park. Hours later, a second camera captured his return, this time stripped down to a tank top and shorts. The green bag, once slack, now looked bulging and full. His coat was gone. Still, Buckley maintained his innocence. But what ultimately shifted the narrative was what happened next. The other suspects began to talk. Faced with their own charges and possible sentencing, David Steele, Dean Speakman, and Vicky Kaland began providing statements. Under questioning, they confirmed that they knew Buckley, not as a friend exactly, but as someone who had approached them days earlier. Buckley, they claimed, had asked them to dispose of some junk for him. They didn't ask questions, but when news of Ellen's disappearance broke, they panicked. Steele, in particular, had tried to burn the items, hoping to avoid implication. It became clear, while these three individuals hadn't directly harmed Ellen, they had unwittingly or possibly knowingly become part of an effort to obstruct the investigation and conceal critical evidence. Meanwhile, new surveillance footage surfaced, showing Buckley returning to Oral Water Park late Friday night, long after the sun had set and the official search had been called off for the evening. It was clear from the footage that Buckley had gone back to the area where Ellen had been found. The only reason he didn't stay long. A police helicopter scanning the area with thermal imaging had inadvertently scared him off. What Buckley had intended to do, retrieve evidence or further tamper with the scene, remains unclear, but it marked yet another suspicious move in an already incriminating pattern. The combination of CCTV footage, forensic evidence, and physical items left little doubt of Buckley's involvement. But investigators were also keen to ensure no further suspects were overlooked. Could anyone else have helped him more directly? Had someone else played a hidden role in Ellen's death? While David Steele and the others were still under scrutiny, forensic investigators continued building a meticulous case. New lab results confirmed that DNA found on Buckley's clothing matched Ellen's, indicating contact. Even more telling, fibers from the rope found in Buckley's duffel bag were detected on items at the crime scene. These weren't random crossovers. These were traceable links in a chain of calculated action. And yet, as solid as the evidence was, one glaring mystery persisted. Why Ellen? Was there any link between Buckley and his victim? Detectives scoured Ellen's phone and computer. They examined social media, school contacts, community connections, and neighborhood CCTV from days prior. But the answer was always the same. No shared history, no mutual acquaintances, no digital contact, not even a passing mention. Ellen had never met Buckley. She had no idea who he was. This reality confirmed the investigators' deepest concern. the attack was entirely random. A chilling, senseless act committed not out of personal grievance, but opportunity. "If it wasn't her, it would have been somebody else," said Detective Tong, voicing what the evidence strongly suggested. Witnesses who came forward in the following days corroborated that Buckley had spoken to other women in the park earlier that day, striking up awkward or seemingly harmless conversations. They described him as curious, too interested, or off-putting, but none of them reported any aggression. It became clear that he had been in the park for hours, waiting, watching, possibly searching for someone alone and vulnerable. By June 20th, with the investigation reaching its climax, Mark Stephen Buckley was formally charged with the murder of Ellen Higginbottom. He was remanded to appear before Wigan Magistrates Court, and the public finally had a face to associate with the heinous crime that had shaken the community. Meanwhile, the other three suspects, Steele, Speakman, and Kayland, faced lesser charges related to handling stolen property and attempting to interfere with an investigation. While their roles were serious and their actions condemned, the focus had shifted squarely onto the man believed to have committed the ultimate crime. But as police continued piecing together the why, they faced a frustrating wall of silence. Detectives paid several visits to Buckley in custody, hoping that with time he might reveal his motive or explain the gaps in the timeline. But they were met with evasion. "He's got an incredible loss of memory when it comes to the finer details," Tong said, noting how Buckley's inability or refusal to elaborate felt more calculated than confused. Eventually, however, the pressure cracked the silence. Faced with insurmountable evidence, Buckley confessed. He admitted to killing Ellen, but even then, his remorse felt surface level, and when asked directly why, he gave no explanation. He said he regretted what happened, but offered nothing that resembled true insight into the motive behind his actions. By September 2017, the case proceeded to court. Mark Stephen Buckley's trial began at Manchester Crown Court, with the world watching and Ellen's family holding their breath for closure that might never fully come. The guilty plea was entered early. While it spared the Higginbottoms and the local community the trauma of a full trial, it also meant that key questions went unanswered. Why did he do it? What was he thinking? Did he feel anything at all in the moments before and after? The prosecution, led by Peter Wright and Neil Fryman, painted a harrowing but factual picture. Buckley had spent nearly 9 hours in Oral Water Park, they told the court, not for leisure or exercise, but in search of an opportunity. He was out to get somebody that day, Fryman stated firmly, emphasizing that Buckley had moved methodically, dressed to conceal his identity, and targeted someone walking alone. They laid out the evidence: the green bag, the rope, the layers of clothing, and his decision to dispose of Ellen's belongings. Each action showed intent, not impulse. While Buckley's defense team offered little resistance, they tried to present mitigating factors. They pointed out that Buckley had no prior convictions for violence, only offenses such as arson, fraud, and theft. They described the act as a terrible aberration, not the behavior of a man with a known pattern of aggression. They also cited his early guilty plea as a sign of remorse, though they made no official claim of mental illness, and there were no psychological evaluations provided to support such a defense. But the court, and Judge David Stockdale, was not swayed. On September 14, 2017, Mark Stephen Buckley was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years and 280 days. The ruling meant that he would not even be eligible for parole until the age of 82, an outcome reflecting the court's view of the gravity of his crime. Meanwhile, David Steele, the man who had attempted to burn Ellen's belongings in the woods, pled guilty to obstructing justice. Though not linked directly to the murder, the court acknowledged his role in complicating the investigation. He received a 2-year suspended sentence and was ordered to complete community service. In the shadow of a murder that shocked an entire community, the legal reckoning extended beyond the primary perpetrator. While Mark Buckley had admitted responsibility for the killing of Ellen Higginbottom, the role of those who knowingly destroyed critical evidence came under sharp legal scrutiny. Among them were Dean Speakman and Vicky Kayland, a couple from Billing whose choices in the days following Ellen's death led them to stand before the court, no longer bystanders, but defendants. Both Speakman and Kayland appeared emotionally shaken as they stood in the courtroom, visibly distressed as the charges against them were read aloud. Speakman, now facing incarceration, and Calland, a mother of 4 young children, wept openly as the court detailed their actions. The charge, handling stolen goods and obstructing justice, offenses that, while secondary to the primary crime, had caused real, lasting harm. According to evidence presented in court, the couple had initially been unaware that the items in their possession had belonged to a murder victim. They had accepted Buckley's story, a lie that he had taken the belongings from a young woman he had seen sitting on a park bench. It was a falsehood they chose not to question. Defense attorneys argued that the couple had not initially understood the consequences of their actions and that their panic had spiraled into irrational decisions. They described a couple under pressure, fearful of being associated with a crime that, by then, had made headlines across the country. Despite this defense, Judge David Stockdale emphasized that their actions had a devastating impact, not only on the case, but on the emotional well-being of Ellen's family, who would never recover the digital memories stored on the destroyed laptop. The loss of the laptop was more than just the loss of an item worth so many hundreds of pounds, Judge Stockdale said during sentencing. It contained documents and photographs which recorded Ellen Higginbottom's life, memories, coursework, moments shared with loved ones. What you did erased part of her story. In handing down sentences, the judge acknowledged the differing levels of culpability between the two. Dean Speakman was sentenced to 20 months in prison, a term reflecting not only the seriousness of his actions, but also the premeditated nature of his return to the burn site. Meanwhile, Vicky Calland received a 16-month suspended sentence, influenced by her role as a caregiver to 4 children and her lower degree of direct involvement in the disposal process. However, punishment extended beyond the courtroom. Speakman faced serious threats while in custody, requiring protective measures to ensure his safety within the prison system. Calland, meanwhile, was forced to relocate from the Billing community following intense public backlash.